Hello and welcome to another Lord of the Rings Rise to War video. I am the player who plays as the King Under the Mountain, and today I'm going to continue my little sort of series of videos, I guess, on Commander Guides is a loose term. Since the 2.5 update, it's kind of more of a Commander discussion. I tend not to see it as a guide because I may not necessarily say to you this is definitely the best in slot weapon or whatever it might be. It's more to discuss where they are in the current meta, are they viable and useful to people, and, you know, also as well whether their outfits are pretty cool. That's kind of where we're at with it. Today, we're going to be talking about one of everyone's favourite characters, I think, in Middle-earth. Even though Rings of Power tried to ruin that for me by calling him Grand Elf, it is, of course, Gandalf the Grey. So what we're going to do today is we're going to compare him to Gandalf the White. And we're going to compare him to other sort of damage reduction commanders is probably the best thing to say. And then we will look at what formations you might find him in, whether units are useful, whether his unique's useful, sort of skill order and that kind of stuff. You know, all the kind of good stuff, really. And with that, we'll take a sip of coffee. So, first thing we will do is you can see that I am in season, so he is no longer level 50, which is annoying because the rest of these guides I've done at level 50. Mine is ascended. If you do want to ascend your Gandalf the Grey at the moment, there is a great opportunity to do so. Sorry, cough. You can use the Ascension vouchers, which are currently in game, which are here. They're only in here for another few days, I believe. But while this is out, how long have we got left? We've got 10 days left. So you can apparently not choose anyone when they're inside, when they're outside your settlement. Interesting. But what you can do is you can, with him being himself, you can find some tier 1 commanders or tier 2 commanders. I think there's only tier 1s though that have Gandalf's item in, which you can then put random items in. I have done a video on this. Or you can actually take 100 items out of Gandalf himself if he's already ascended to help level him up further using this voucher. Again, I have done that for a few commanders, and I have done a video on it. So please check that out if you want to. Like I say, for this example with Dwalin, you will get some of his own item back. So 180 of those I could do by just putting 180 random ones in. Plus, I could get 10 of these for Gimli. And Dwalin's a really good one anyway, because you can get the Iflin coin for Dane. Anyway, that's not what this video is about, but you can certainly make that useful and check out that video, because I think it's a good way of leveling your Gandalf if you so wish. So, let's start with the skills. And that's Bjorn. So that's not really going to help at this stage. Here he goes. Let's start with the skills. So, if I was running Gandalf for probably a late build Respect 4, I probably wouldn't have this tree like this. So I would probably change all this build, if I'm being honest. 2 schools of thought with the Respect 4. So at Respect 4, you now get 2 trees and a 4th. So I would be going Max in White Council. And if I'm honest, I would probably max Wizard. Mainly because, we'll talk through skills in a second once I've set up this build. And I would probably put 4 points in the Grey. The reason I would go this way, and we'll just talk through the skills. So the Grey restores 150% HP to 1 allied formation once each round, effect modified by a focus stat. This is good because you're likely to be modified quite substantially by your focus stat with the gear that you're going to put on him. We'll come into that later on. And at level 5, you get a 60% chance to restore HP 1 additional time, which is pretty handy. It's over half a chance, and you get 5 focus at level 10. Is it a necessity? Probably not. You could probably get that to 9 points. You'd be pretty happy. His other skill, which is quite interesting, and I've been using this to try and get some extra damage out of him during this PvE period that I'm in. So, again, 2 schools of 4. I can happily see why someone would max this out and only have 4 points in Wizard, but I'm going to go through why I'm probably more likely to put it in Wizard than I am anything else. So, for the first 4 rounds, Mithrandir does the Commander's Formation has a 60% chance to gain dual blows each round. Now, dual blows means they attack twice. which is kind of cool, really. It's a shame, really, that this no longer happens every instance of damage that it does like it did in 1.0, but anyway, that's fine. Then at level 10, the Commander's Formation gains initiative while this effect is active, and at level 5, it takes effect in the first 5 rounds. So it's basically half the fight that you can get dual blows, which, you know, useful. You can get rid of some White Council. You can do a little bit of troop damage. You know, it depends how high your command is, which kind of helps get you a little bit of troop damage out. I'm not entirely convinced we need to talk about this skill too much, but as we're in the video, we may as well. Probably the most powerful skill that he has, and particularly for a tier 2 commander, it's very, very powerful, is the White Council skill. So 4 allied formations receive 18% less damage from the first 5 hits taken, effect modified by focus stat. If your focus stat's high enough, you can get that to 70-80%, somewhere around that figure. It is a massive, massive reduction, but there is now a lot of different people who can clear White Council quite fast, e.g. Saruman, for example, or Shadow. At level 5, it affects instances increased to 6. That's 6 instances of damage. That's 6 separate attacks. And at level 10, it increases to 7. That's quite useful, particularly for things like PvE. That extra instance when you just try to protect your damage dealers is good. And then his level 5 skill is Wizard, another skill that he shares with Gandalf the White. So he shares the R2 and the R4 skill with Gandalf the White. And Wizard deals 270% focus damage once to 1 to 2 enemy formations. This damage reduces the target's defense by 10 for 1 round at level 5. In addition, focus damage dealt plus 5% for 1 round. Now, I personally will go like this because I like to get a little tiny bit of damage out of him, and I quite like this defense. I can see that people may want the heal a little bit more, so if you were going to do that, you would probably go like this. And then put 10 points in here, although I don't really think you need 10 in here. I'd probably go 9 in here, because you don't really need that extra 5 focus for what it is. And then I would put 5 points in here, which I think is a respectable kind of build for him. Also, if you wanted to look at maybe a little bit more damage from him rather than just protection, you could probably look at going 10 points in Mithrandir. You could do 10 points in White Council. And you could do 4 in Wizard. I don't see a point in putting only 9 points in here or 9 points in here to get the 5 points in Wizard, if I'm honest, for the 10 defense. If you're at Respect 5, I would add that extra skill point in there like that, if you're going to do that build, or go that way around. If I was Respect 5, that would be one of the builds that I would try and run. If I was Respect 5, I would also probably try and run this. I'm just wasting gems for fun here, but I would probably also look at going something like, depending on my equipment, of course. Something like this, I think, would probably be where I'm at. If I got to Respect 10, I'd just max out one of the trees. You pay your money, you take the choice. You can either go the heal, you can either go more damage by going for these 3 trees. Completely up to you, to be perfectly honest. But either way around, I think it just depends on your build and how it's going to work. From there, because we will go into some equipment shortly, but we'll go to the Relic. For a tier 2 commander, which you're pretty much going to use as a tank to a degree, I would say, realistically, or a support commander who can tank a bit, his unique is actually very, very good. So you are looking at command stat, which is good. His focus stat is good. If you are playing through Mithrandir, unit attack's okay, and no matter which way around you're playing, unit defense is good. So actually strengthening Glamdring is probably one of the better relics to strengthen if you're going to play with Gandalf the Grey. And then the sub-skill's even better, so Leader of the Free Folk. Damage received by the formation, minus 2% flat. That's focus or physical, whichever it might be. Or poison, elemental damage, all that kind of stuff, flat 2%. And if you are going to refine it, it goes up to 12%, which is actually pretty OP, making him a really, really good sort of support tank. So I do think it's one of the better uniques. It's nice to see that on a tier 2 commander, which is a little bit cheaper. So that's quite good. His bloodline skill is a bit of a crazy one as well, so he is quite versatile. You have got man, elf, dwarf, and hobbit for the extra defense, so you've got lots of options there from the good side. I'm not sure if it counts for evil men. I would very much doubt it, because I presume it would say evil men, so that's also helpful. The outfit, you have to, if you've got your contrast not quite right on YouTube, on your computer, or whatever it might be, it's very difficult to see a change, but it's very subtle. Is the Zenith outfit? Um, I mean, realistically, it just goes slightly lighter. It's almost like he's slowly hybriding his way into being Gandalf the White. I mean, I don't mind it. I'd use it just because it's, the Zenith outfit. But, I don't think that necessarily the outfit is unimaginative is probably the case. We'll go into equipment and then we'll go into how the skills interact like we've been trying to do with a lot of these videos. So, depending on how you're going to do it, for me, I use him more as a support build with higher command than higher focus. There's two schools of thought with it. So I build Gandalf to basically help protect my formation, and I do the same with Gandalf the White. So I have something with decent command as an accessory with some decent unit defense because I want him to tank through the units. It's also nice to have any of the Gandalfs with a little bit of initiative because you need to try and get that White Council hopefully higher than any Sauron that you hit, but we'll go into that when we're trying to look at sort of how the skills interact. I do the same with the weapon. I look for command. Noldor Sword for me is probably best in slot. I know I wouldn't think about that and say I wanted to talk about it if you're going down the defense and command route because you get some nice focus and you get some good unit defense. I do use the wizard hat to increase focus. I don't think there's anything wrong with using a call because then you're getting more commands, so you can get a little bit more unit defense and a little bit more attack out of him as well, while still getting some okay focus. Not exactly ideal. And as a chess piece, really the Numenorian chess piece is probably the best one that I could find, but unfortunately I don't have that, so I use the Great Plate of the East. Still decent focus, but it keeps me the set to get this. And I try and aim for being above 200 focus. So I think mine at level 50 comes out about 219, 220, something like that. And then you get 10 points from the ring. So it's still a reasonable White Council. The other school of thought, gear-wise, if you're going into his focus tree and want him to try and cause some damage, which he doesn't do as much as a Gandalf the White, you would be looking at something like your Obsidian Dagger. If you are still trying to stay quicker than a Sauron, you might look at the Reach of the Riddermark, for example. Something like that would probably also be okay. And realistically, you're looking at the Fine Smoking Pipe as your accessory, just because you're getting a lot of focus and a lot of damage, to be honest. And it's a consistent damage output. The other school of thought with that is as well, your focus is higher. So you will have a more formidable White Council. It'll be sort of, instead of being around the 55% mark, something like that, it'll go to sort of a 70% mark with the higher amount of focus. The only caveat to that is if you don't have any speed and you hit a Sauron who is faster than you, this skill here, the enemy, will debuff you down to pretty much that extra focus that you've stacked on your commander is completely pointless because your stats will go down quite significantly by the time White Council's in play anyway. I've said that in a lot of different videos, but it's a really powerful skill. So this 15% modified by focus from the enemy is a debuff to you. If you are not quicker than Sauron, this hits you and your focus will be right down anyway to pretty much where you are with the other build. So I think it is important to get some speed on your Gandalf the White just to make sure he is quicker than a Sauron personally. It also helps. It's difficult to do, but it also helps if you're faster than a Witch King because his Lord of Minas Morgul skill also, even though it's a little bit more random with 2 enemy commanders, -10 for 5 rounds on attack, focus and defense, and that's modified by command. So if you've got someone building a fairly tanky Witch King like me, that debuff is quite significant to your focus. So Witch King can quite hard counter Gandalf's, or either Gandalf's, to be honest, White Council skill as well. But it is a little bit more random with it only having hitting 2 formations. People tend to use the high focus build when they pair him with Gil-galad or an Undying, I guess, if you're NRP. And that is taking advantage of the evasion from either Undead Commander or from Kingly Kin. The first 2 rounds for Kingly Kin, for example, alpha units in 3 allied formations have a 60% chance to evade. That goes up to 70% for those first 2 rounds. if you are maxing out at level 10, which is pretty much the first skill that everyone does for Gil Galad, and it's an R0 skill, so it's quite easy to run into it even if they are free to play. What this does is it means you take less hits, and this means your White Council extends into rounds 3, 4, possibly, and you potentially, providing how quick it's sort of been removed, you are running into things like Skin Changer, and you've still got some White Council taking down this damage, and you will run into, most likely, one of the dwarves with a Durin's Blood, which again, you'll be taking down this skill by the sort of like your White Council, which again massively decreases the damage that your formation's taking, making one of the Gandalfs either or still quite a potent force in any formation. Not to say that they have to be in there, but it does help, I think. So their basic damage is slightly different. Gandalf the White's is a little bit higher. You'd expect that because he's a tier 3 commander. The main difference between Gandalf the White and Gandalf the Grey is this White Rider tree, which a lot of commanders can quite significantly benefit from. So someone like a Bjorn, for example, and a Dane, your damage dealers basically do benefit quite significantly from White Rider and this plus 25% damage, which can help negate some of the debuffs of other commanders as well. So something to look out for. They do both have the Wizard tree, and I do like using this minus 10 defense over the White, but Gandalf the White has more damage options and a unique which allows you to be slightly more potent if it's refined. So the Red Ring, for example, here I'll probably look at it from the other angle because it looks good. After the commander launches, normal attacks deals 10% physical damage once and 10% focus damage once. So Gandalf the White is quite good at clearing some White Council off another formation as well, or evade stacks if it's something like an Undying. He also reduces the damage of the formation, but only when it's Orcs, whereas Gandalf the Greys is just a flat reduction. Orcs are slightly more prevalent now, but that's quite sort of like an interesting sort of change. Fully refined, this is giving damage and less reduction, whereas Gandalf the Greys is giving reduction and no damage. So they are slightly different, and obviously as a tier 2 commander, you tend to see Gandalf the Grey in the more free-to-play formations or secondary formations. Do I think he's worth getting to Zenith levels? Yeah, I probably would say he isn't a bad Zenith level commander to have. I think as a tank, he's pretty good. I've got a report just from earlier on when he was hitting a level 40 mob, which isn't exactly, anything too fancy at the moment. But just from hitting a level 40 mob earlier on, this is his reduction. So he's not taking a great deal of damage there across the whole formation. If I look into things like the heal, so it's not a massive heal, but then it's not really in that build. And he's done 33,000 damage with Guardians just from troops, which is still useful. I mean, with this, I've got 2 people who are basically getting high command that are just using Guardians. It's PvE, but you will get a small amount of damage from the troops. In this, I was in the follow-up build. So this will be with them acting twice in a couple of rounds. So you can get some okay damage out of him as well while he's supporting, but mainly he's just being used as a tank. And he is very, very good at doing that while protecting the formation with a White Council. So if we just go back and have a look at him again, this is with 503 commands. So his damage received is a lot less, but also the damage dealt is also a lot more. So if you were looking at going into the more troop build side of it with Mithrandir, or trying to get him as a tank who can do a little bit of damage more for a troop, the more command you have, the better, to be perfectly honest. And obviously command now affects the heal as well. So if you're looking at doing that, it's kind of a trade-off, because if you can get this kind of mix of focus and command gear, you can get the Grey to scale quite nicely. I still think healing is a little bit rubbish, but it is a small heal that's it can be fairly significant in some fights, I guess. I've seen it get as high as sort of 10 or 12k, which isn't, to be sniffed at while it isn't the main skill. Sort of problems and things that are from Gandalf the Grey's kit that he doesn't have in comparison to some others. He doesn't have a stun at all now. So he used to have a stun. There is no stun anymore in any part of his kit, which stun is quite powerful now in the meta. So there's no stun or madness, which I think is a little bit sad that he hasn't got that anymore. I think it was Wizard that used to give the stun. The other thing to compare is White Council. So White Council's a fantastic skill, one of the best skills in the game. So to see it on a tier 2 commander always puts him somewhere near the meta, whether it be in a B team or whether it be in an A team. At high Zenith levels, obviously, and you're filling 3.5 trees, there is probably a very good kind of troop support with some focus damage and a little bit of a heal on, which is not to be sniffed at, to be honest. And he's easier to level up now in regards to respect levels than Gandalf the White, so just because of the changes they've made. So I think he's good, particularly for a free to play or low spender kind of level, to get him up and help you protect your formation. Just to compare White Council to Thrain's Guard, which is probably the closest thing to a White Council that you can get, and this is where I struggle now to find Falcon, who is somewhere in this mess. That's Mouth Sauron, that's definitely not Falcon. Here he is, sorry. So, just to compare, Thrain's Guard, level 10. And this is actually another really powerful skill. It's basically a dwarven version of White Council, and if you can stack this with enough command from the level 10, you can still get to 60-ish% damage reduction. And it also comes with 8 instances of damage rather than 7, but it is troop specific, so you are tied into dwarven units. But if you're going to compare that to White Council, this cannot be debuffed by Sauron. So again, one of the positives of this versus White Council is the fact that there is no debuff that can happen to Thrain's Guard. It just happens, which is quite useful. So if you're going to compare him to Gandalf the Grey, you've got a healing musician, you've got a little bit of damage, which is the equivalent of the wizard, I would guess. It's just instead of having troop follow up, you've got more stack defense, which arguably I would say is more useful, potentially. So if you play dwarves, I would say Falcon is a better version of a Gandalf the Grey, just for me personally. Mainly because his unique also stacks pretty well. Again, very similar to Gandalf's, but this is sort of a 12%, 12% minimum depending on how much it is. So it's a very similar kind of unique to Gandalf's in the way it works. It's just he is more of a defensive commander, so it's kind of a choice. They're both very similar. I would argue if you're going pure tank, Falcon is the better option. If you want a little tiny bit of more damage out of it than just tank, then obviously Gandalf's better as a support commander personally. To compare the two, like I say, do I think he's great? Yes, I do. Do I use him all the time? Yes, I do. He's in my B team, and to be honest, when I've been doing PvE, he's actually been outperforming Gandalf the White in certain scenarios. So he is very versatile and very useful. So as a sort of lower spender, I think it's something that people should definitely get into. What kind of formation would you see him in role play? I guess you could do the same sort of thing where you've got 2 damage dealers, Gandalf the Grey and probably Gil for evade if you have got him. If not, you're probably looking at something like a Galadriel or a 3rd damage dealer, to be perfectly honest. Or you can just go for double tanking with Falcon and Gandalf. The only thing I'll say to that is you're kind of wasting White Council and Thrain's Guard. It is useful, but it just sort of taps out at 80% I think it is the max reduction. But then Falcon will also tank providing you're using dwarves. Again, he's unit wise, he's not really he is versatile. I would probably personally look to play him with something that is a little bit more of a tanky troop. If you want some more troop damage from him, you could possibly go for something which is going to cause a bit of damage from a troop perspective. I've seen people try and run him with March Wardens to try and get some damage with some OK effect while still being able to tank. So there's lots of options for him, and I think from a setup effect point of view, to protect White Council, you do need a little bit of agility, and I tend to use protection or something like a divide and conquer, really, just to sort of make sure he's tanking. Obviously, there is a school of thought that if you're trying to run him for a bit of damage, you could possibly have Law of the Arcane, just to try and get some extra damage output from him. Where do I think he sits from a roleplay perspective? I think he's very, very important. There isn't another really skill. I suppose it's less important than NRP to a degree because you've got a few more options. But White Council is one of the strongest skills in the game, whether we like it or not. There are ways now of removing it, like I say, from something like a Saruman, for example, now, who's got the head of the White Council skill tree, who absolutely smashes down White Council by doing this twice damage to 3 formations. You've also got people like the Undying, and you've got people like the Shadow who also have great skills like Undertaker and Shape of the Void, and also Black Numenorian, to be honest, that are also stripping White Council fast. So that's why for me it's also important that he can tank. When combined with Gil-galad, of course, that kind of the higher focus is more prevalent, just because you can protect your White Council for longer, and your Gandalf can be slightly made of paper. NRP I still think is important. For the last 3 or 4 seasons, I've still run him in my B team for protection. That might change this season, as I might be trying to send Falcon, I think, and get his unique, but just so I can run something a little bit slower and tank more. So I'm when I'm running into Saurons, I think it's important that I have something as a skill that I'm protecting, because it's command, not focus based. So go try and test that out, I think. But realistically, particularly for a low spender and trying to get people through levels, and each skill point does matter to a degree to him, I think he's a great option, Gandalf, to be honest. He's not as good as Gandalf the White, but he offers something a little bit different because he's more protection based for me. And that was about everything I wanted to talk about with him. Like I say, I think he's fantastic. He's a cool character from the films, obviously, and from the lore. He's got a great kind of facade, and the way he carries himself throughout the movies. I think Ian McKellen did a great job. Books, he was great as well. But Rings of Power, probably Gandalf wasn't the way forward, but he's still been all right in that. So anyway, if in doubt with all these things, always follow your nose.